Hello, my dreamers and believers. It's your girl, Latina Raven, and this show is called On the Way to Famous. So, on this show, we take the artists on their journey from humble beginnings all the way until they've made it and all the struggles in between. So, today, my guest was the lead singer of George Clinton's band 420 Funk Mob. He's part of his own seven-piece band called the Planet 12 Movement. He's worked with artists such as Amy Winehouse, the late great Amy Winehouse, and his song Get Down was featured on season premiere of the Bad Girls Club and the L Word. He also has another hit called Get Hollywood on him, which was featured in the season premiere of MTV's The Real World Hollywood. Please welcome to my show, Lawrence Worrell, aka Law. How you doing, Law?
Hey, what's going on? That's quite an introduction. Thank you. I'm blessed and happy to be here. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being on my show and accepting the invitation. It's awesome.
Of course. Thank you.
So now tell us how little Lawrence was growing up. Where you from?
Okay, first and foremost, as most of my fans may know directly, even if they're not a direct fan of mine, I represent my city proudly. I am from the streets of Brooklyn, born and raised, St. Mark's Avenue, Crown Heights, Albany Projects, with a little bit of Bed-Stuy, do or die, and Brownsville, never ran, never will in me. So that's the first part of it. As a kid, very energetic, set was on his mind, very playful, very inquisitive, happy for the most part, even though growing up in the hood does have its struggles, but for the most part, I was a cheerful, happy kid that really had not a lot to complain about. When you have a mother and a father and a family that really loves and helps, that makes the most of everything. So for the most part, I'm just very happy, cheerful, and of course, as most people may know, very passionate about music. So sometimes I tend to get very in your face and talkative at times because it's a passion of mine. I'm very into it, and I've been like that since I was a kid. So
Yeah, definitely. So you grew up in the hood just like I did. I grew up in
hell
Brooklyn.
yeah,
Yep, but I'm from the Bronx, birthplace of hip
boogie
hop.
down, BX,
And
hip
we
hop
lived off of,
birthplace.
yeah, and we lived off of that government cheese. This
Government
generation
cheese,
don't know nothing
mayonnaise
about that.
sandwiches, Kool-Aid in the glass jar. That's, people don't understand. If you're not from the hood, you can't relate. That's why I love when I run into my hood folks, no matter where I go. And I've pretty much been all over the world. There's still a couple of places I haven't been, but anywhere I go, if I'm running to anybody from either Detroit, Memphis, L.A., like we have so much in common. And I think the band War said it best. The world is a ghetto, and I'm a total believer in that. So it's like anybody I ever met from the hood, because all hoods have a commonality, even with differences, but we all can relate to, the blocks of government cheese. My grandmother, rest her soul, Beatrice Taylor, that woman showed the various ways that you can use government cheese and everything, whether it was cornflakes and stuff, no frills, we know about that. And that's the thing, food stamps, that's, we grew up with that. So that's pretty much close to home, no matter where I go, whether you're Black, white, or Hispanic. If you grew up in the hood, you understood what that meant. And to this very day, I done stayed in 5-star hotels, ate the finest cuisines you can possibly imagine, but nothing beats a bomb-ass grilled cheese sandwich, ramen noodles, 50-cent ices or 50 cents. So like that stuff still resonates with me even as an adult to this very day. So I agree.
I know. And back then we had penny candies. So if you got a quarter,
wow, yeah. Woo, picture
boy, you had a quarter, you went to the store, you bought up all the little petty candies, you had a bag full, you thought you was shit. It was just like,
you couldn't, man, that was me and my brothers and my cousins, man. We couldn't tell us nothing.
Yeah. Oh my God, those were the good old days. And back then, the music was really fun too. I mean, I used to listen to I'll Be Sure and like Slick Rick. He's like still one of my favorite rappers of all time. And like
in my top 20 for a reason. So
yeah. So like, what was the kind of music that you were into back when you were little Lawrence?
Well, I mean, it's safe to say before I even answer that question, I think most of my fans already know That's what Planet 12 represents, you know, the versatility. I grew up in a very diverse household, whereas in some families, there was only one or two kinds of music. So of course, you know, my roots are gospel, R&B because of my legendary grandfather, Sam Bluesman Taylor, my late uncle, Bobby Real Bill Taylor, and of course, my mother, Sandra Taylor. So you got gospel, R&B, and funk with a little bit of pop, because my mom was very much into Nancy Wilson, Dionne Warwick, as well as Shaka Khan and Aretha and Patty and all the divas that we know. So I grew up in a whole environment of so many influences where everybody had a section. My family was my Juilliard for music. So of course, growing up, it played a very healthy understanding of my relationship with music and what I gravitate towards. So like most young black males, my first primary hero outside of my own family, of course, without question, Michael Jackson. I mean, because at that particular point, transition of him getting ready to kind of leave his brother, because I love all six Jacksons, but you know, that transition that Michael was making to becoming the Michael that we would come to know and love as an adult, it influenced anybody who's a young black male in any part of the world. You were influenced by my name a singer he didn't influence, and coming after him would probably be without question Prince and Stevie Wonder, because they became to me more the artistic merit. So like any other 80s baby, I grew up in the mix where now a lot of the people who were popular in my mother's era that were still around were actually having a profound effect on the crossover success that they were having. You know, people like the Pointer Sisters, you know, they went from being a quartet to being a 3-member group and conquering the pop game. Then you had Luther Vandross, who made his debut as a solo artist, but as everybody knows, Luther was already paying his dues, singing backup on Sister Sledge and writing stuff for Shaka and the Wiz and all that kind of stuff. So now here I am. And then there's young Whitney Houston, you know, coming from her mother, Sissy Houston. Now she's finally making her pathway. But it connected everything together for me as a kid. And of course, even though all those people I love, they were all adults. So for me as a kid, it began to make sense when these 5 young black nappy head kids from Boston named New Edition came into the mix, and it spoke directly to me, because it's one thing to have Michael Jackson and Prince and Stevie, Jimi Hendrix and James Brown, but when you see kids that look like you, that dress like you, it's like, hey, I could do that shit too. I want to do that too. So it became, I was already doing it, but I'm just saying it just made more sense. I was already breakdancing in the streets because, you know, at that point, hip hop then took over the landscape, and now pop music and pop culture was finally starting to embrace the new art form, even though I had been around for like the last 3 or 4 years. But with movies like Beach Street and Wild Style, and every 80s sitcom had somebody trying to break dance, even though they really couldn't. So it's almost like, you know, like different strokes when Mr. Drummond had the, he had the glove on trying to be like Michael. So that's how you know. I grew up in the era where hip hop was just starting to get that. So imagine me being that young kid in my hood. I'm not the only kid like that in my hood, but I was definitely one of the top 3 where I encompassed everything. So I'm singing in church on Sunday at my grandmother's church, United Missionary Baptist Church. And then of course, during the week, nothing but R&B, funk, heavy metal, rock and roll, and pop. So, you know, that was my whole world.
Yeah, and then you see the power of a lot of those names that you just dropped.
Yes.
I mean, some of these people have made the greatest music that's ever gonna be, right?
Don't get me started.
No, I know, because today's music doesn't have that same soul and funk like it did back in the day. I think every generation feels that way though, but 70s, 80s, it was like here, it came from the heart. You know what I mean? And it was real. So I totally understand all the memories back in the day in the streets. You're playing double dutch, you're playing Skelly, you're like
my sister, Skelly, handball, you know,
all of that.
For us in Brooklyn, it was Coco Levio. And the reason why I have to say that, because that is really a Brooklyn thing, because I've met people, of course, from all 5 bars. I lived in Queens at one point. Shout out to Southside Jamaica. I used to live over there too. But the thing is that I noticed the difference between the 5 boroughs. Coco Levio is really something that belongs to us Brooklynites. So that was like the #1 game in my block on St. Mark's Avenue. We played the 3 top games we played was, of course, tag / freeze tag, follow the leader, because we had a lot of different things in our neighborhood. We can do a whole bunch of impossible things where sometimes we have I still got scars on my knees from when I was a kid, from busting my ass on broken glass that was in the park, from the guys drinking all night and busting bottles. And of course, the #1 game was Coco Livio. So again, I can relate.
Yeah, man. Oh my goodness. And then of course the girls, us, other than the double dutch, we were doing cheers. And you couldn't tell us
Yes.
nothing. We was in there doing
And
our
us
cheers.
boys used to mess with y'all girls when y'all were trying to do cheers and stuff. We would bother y'all. So
Yeah. And they give us the gills and stuff in the back
you
of our neck.
said gills.
Yeah, I'm
Oh
taking
my
it
God.
back. I'm taking it
Damn,
back.
if that's not 90s, I don't know what the hell is. Wow. She said gills. That's crazy.
For real, man. I mean, I had to
Wow.
do it. I had to do it. Okay,
No, I
back.
love it. I love it. I love it. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, so you had all these musical influences, and so when you were younger, did you like join like all of the school plays? Did you go
Yeah.
like the Boys and Girls Club and did stuff? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, I was definitely that. Me, my sister slash cousin, Chi Chi, and then later on, my younger sibling slash cousins, Diana, David. Like we were all. I mean, all of my cousins, and for the most part, most of them were involved. We were always involved in the arts. Like I was doing Con Edison used to throw these dance competitions, and me and my cousins would always come in like first or second place all the times, because for relative part of our dancing and loving to perform. I won my first talent show in PS 289 singing New Edition's Lost in Love. So once I hit that first line and the girls started screaming, I'm like, okay, this is where I really want to be. So this is kind of like the thing. There were the Big Apple games where I would battle guys who were older than me, and I would burn them in a battle so bad they wanted to fight me. So I had a lot of these. Yeah, this is some real shit I'm telling y'all. Like, this is really. So yeah, I was that kid. I definitely was involved in certain school plays. Of course, sometimes I didn't get the starring role all the time. And guess what? Some roles I just did supporting. Even if I had 2 or 3 lines, I knew how to make it work. So I was definitely that kid that was somewhat proactive in the arts when it came to school plays and assemblies and things of that nature.
See, they wanted to get you because you were stealing the hearts of the girls they were trying to talk to. And here come little Lawrence singing his little voice, trying to steal them. They was hating, but it's all good. It's all good. So sing us a little New Edition. Let's hear a little bit.
Oh, New Edition. Wow, what can I sing without straining my voice? Let me see.
Like take us back to when you was about to perform and you was about to hit that note and sing for us a little bit.
Would you love me if nights were cold? Would you love me when I grow old? Would you share my life in this music? Take me by surprise and say you're there. I'm lost in love. I can't live without you. And I'm lost in love. And it's true. I can't live without you. Oh no. A little something.
Look at you, got me blushing. I'm black. I ain't supposed to be blushing like that. Look at this. Look at this.
I was listen. You couldn't listen. Now let me just give a shout out to my big bro, my mentor, Mr. Ralph Tresvant, because to me, if Michael Jackson had got prepackaged as a kid in the 80s, that would be Ralph Tresvant. Because remember, at that point, Michael Jackson was now a full-grown adult. So the only reminiscent thing to the Michael of the 70s that my mother grew up with was Ralph. So I had to pay attention to him more than anything else. And Ralph just, the only time me and my sister got along, because she swore up and down one day that she was going to be Mrs. Tresvant. But I was watching Ralph for a whole nother reason, because Ralph had the voice, the charisma, and of course he had the Michael thing. But you know what? Honestly, Ralph, in my opinion, he really came into, even though he may have started out that way, Ralph really came into his own, even as he got older. Like even right around the time when they did the Heartbreak album and all that. And I paid attention to him the most, because to me, he combined the best of all of those worlds. Even as his voice got even more refined as a singer, I hear the Marvin Gaye influence, but he was like that as a kid. So I just had to give a real shout out to him because I really, as everybody knows, I mean, same thing with New Kids on the Block. Like I studied Jordan Knight and Ralph Tresvant like no other in terms of getting my singer to fit in the mode of where I was as a kid,
Right.
So I had to just get that real quick.
I hear that. I hear that. And so when you was going around winning all these little talent shows and stuff like that, did you think that that's what you wanted to do for a living? And did you think, how was I going to make it?
Well, here's the truth. The truth is that I started doing shows professionally at 7. So the thing with me is that, and I say this all the time, because you hear about families that are forced into the music business or people who just naturally gravitate towards you. And I always used to have to correct people because, there were so many things said about the Jacksons and the late Joseph Jackson, who I feel is the quintessential template, in my opinion, as far as how to mold your kids into stardom. I'm not talking about the things that people don't agree with, but as far as what he did, he invested in his children. He saw that his kids had talent and said, y'all not going to work in the steel mill like I had to. Remember, music was his hobby, but he couldn't do it for a living because he had to feed 9 mouths. So he couldn't do it. So when he learned that his kids were talented, he said, okay, Tito, you've been playing my guitar. I'm gonna give you a beating, but show me what you can do. You've been touching my guitar when I'm not here. Let me see what you can do. And Tito, as we all know the story, Tito played and they came in and sang. He was like, oh, shoot, you know what? This is what y'all want to do. If this is what y'all really want to do, it's going to be work. And that was just it. So for me, I wasn't forced into it. So I started doing professional gigs at 7 years old, singing for Parks Department Recreation, thanks to my mother. My mother was already, and my mother is still an in-demand singer, session work, shows, and things like that. My mother still tours, and the crazy part is that everywhere that my mother went, I went with her. My mother said she could put me in the back stage where they couldn't see me, on the back of the club, and I would be still the whole time just listening. So that's how you knew that music was really meant to be in the fabric of what I did. They didn't have to force me. I was really, really into it at that time. So honestly, I kind of already knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? So it just became more prevalent as I got older. So the more I got into all different kinds of stuff, and then when I began to have an understanding of the industry, of course, that's way later, because once you start getting into the business aspect of it, which I learned at a very early age, that's when you begin to kind of look at things a little bit differently than you did when you was a kid. Because every kid is starving now, as you know. Yeah. You see television like, yeah, I want to be famous. I want to be. But then as you get older, for those who don't get caught up in the hype, you learn as you go along. But for the most part, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but for the most part, I already knew what I wanted to do and nobody forced me. So I think I made it easy for my grandfather, my uncle, and my mom, and all of her famous friends,
Well, yeah, I mean, that was awesome that you had that and that you actually took it and used it and made something positive from it. So bravo for that. So now as a teenager, you're a little older, you got that voice, so you stealing ladies' hearts all over the place and stuff like that. I mean, of course, I mean, that's what happens when you have a beautiful voice and a great personality.
That's
Go with it.
thank you. I mean, that's what they say, but
Yeah. So then, what did you do? Like, tell us what you did for prom. Like, were you like prom king? Did you sing at your prom? Anything like that happen?
Well, I mean, here's the thing with me. As a teenager, they call it the struggle transition for a reason. Because now, as you grow, there's other kids your age who are growing too. So interests become far and few in between. You gotta remember, we're talking about the 90s. This is 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95. Those are the prime teenage years, because you got to remember, I'm in New York now. And as anybody knows, the crack era changed everything, because now a lot of my friends and some of my relatives, they were getting into the streets a little bit more, because we all street. But the thing was just that at that particular point, my friends were broken up into 4 sections. So let's go down the line. You had the artsy kids that love music, theater. That was me. Then you had the nerdy kids who love school. That was me. Then you had the other half of that, where a lot of my friends were gang members. We talking about low lives, DSEPs, Face Head, Latin Kings. I had friends in all of those gangs, and these were my friends. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
And then last but not least, you had the hustlers, because now that the crack epidemic done hit, it changed the game on a lot of different levels, for some for good and some for bad, because as Jay-Z said, you can't knock the hustle. So for me, I never really did. I understood it in more ways than one, and I actually applied that more to what I was doing, but I chose to hustle music instead. That was part of what I was starting to do, the same way my friends were hustling other things. So my thing is just that my world was entwined within the fabric of what was going on. So we're talking about, you know, Guess, Polo, Timberland, everything you could think of. Tommy Hilfiger was the fashion, baggy jeans, you know, the whole bit like that. What I mean, it explains how I dress now. Because everybody's like, your law got that finished flavor, but it's still fresh. I said, you want to know why? Because now all the kids that's my son's age or younger, they act like they bringing Champion back. I said, Champion never left. Where y'all been at? I stayed with mine. I never. My son looked in my closet one day. He was like, "Yo, Dad, these are most of your outfits from high school." I was like, "Yeah," and I could still wear them. Ain't that something? So the thing is that it's interesting. So anyway, as a kid, on a teenage level, that was my world, because now I had an understanding. You know, like I did normal stuff. Wasn't prom king, but I definitely was a standout that night. I had a red and black suit. I had my little afro, because Redman was my idol at that particular point. So sideburns over here, always had a pick in my hair. So I had identity. My high school years were better than my junior high school years. I struggled more so in junior high. My high school years were the shit. I went to Boys and Girls High in Bed-Stuy, so I couldn't even. You understand what I'm saying?
I know Boys and Girls,
AKA the High. So you know how popular Fulton Street was, right on there on the corner of Lewis Avenue, where Big Daddy Kane is from. So I those were the best years for me. And you gotta remember, again, like I told you, who my sets of friends were. So I done seen crazy stuff. I seen the fun stuff, and then also remember too, me and my brother and my cousins, while most kids were dreaming about going to the club, because of who my grandfather and my mother was, we was already in the club at 13, 14 years old. No ID, no none of that. Like we were able to actually experience what it felt like to be grown. So we kind of grew up fast, not fast, but more so we have more privileges than the average kids around our age that had to sneak out to do certain stuff. We really didn't have to. I mean, certain things we did, but it's like a lot of stuff we didn't have to sneak out and do, because we were kind of part of what was going on in our family structure, which was playing music. So me and my older brother, Casino Chip, on the West Coast, we was the roadies, we in the club, you know, playing music and trying to talk to the women who were a little bit older than us. So
yeah, I
you know, so we was living it. So long story short, my teenage years were incredible. I have no regrets. I lived every moment of it that you can possibly imagine.
That is awesome. So now, who was on your wall? Because as a teenager in the 80s and 90s, we had posters from Big Papa, from Word Up magazine, from everybody. So who was on your wall?
Oh, that's easy. Pretty much Public Enemy, Shantae Moore. Yes, absolutely. I still crush on that woman. New Kids on the Block, New Edition, Bobby Brown, of course, Janet Jackson. Definitely Cameo, Belle Biv DeVoe, Debbie Gibson, believe it or not. Who else I'm gonna think of? Of course, Rakim, Jay-Z. And it's funny with Jay-Z, because my older brother grew up with Jay-Z and Marcy. We both did. So it's almost like a thing as to where, as he started to become a little bit more popular than he was in the mid 80s, it just felt good to have him on my wall to aspire. Lionel Richie, of course. Like Biggie said, Salt and Pepper, Heavy D. I had them all up on my wall. Like that's why when Biggie said that line, I felt every impact of that. You know, Word Up magazine, Right On. I don't think I had Tiger. I think Tiger was like right before we got into Right On and all that kind. Source magazine covers, all that stuff. Source magazine, Vibe when it was hot. I still have all my Source right in my garage. I still have all of my Source and Vibe magazines and some of my Right On magazines that are collector's items now as we speak. So for the most part, for the most part, I had my hip hop and my contemporary R&B heroes. I had the Good Girls on there. All the groups who were either short-lived or long-term. Like if I dug you, I had you on my wall. If I loved you, I had your shirt, I had your hat. Even to this day, when you see pictures of what I take, if it's a sports team that I love, you know, because everybody knows Celtics is my #1 favorite team. Anytime you see me with any type of sports thing or any artist or anybody or a movie that I love, that's because I'm really a fan of that movie or that pop culture theme, whatever it is, I'm a fan of. So I definitely had those on my list.
So see, growing up in the hood, I got a lot of shit for loving New Kids on the Block. They were like, you know, you're Spanish or black. What are you doing with these white boys that you're on your, you know, in your Trapper Keeper? Because back then we had the Trapper Keeper.
Yes, Trapper Keepers. Oh my God.
Yeah,
wow.
I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing it back. So you being a male into New Kids and Debbie Gibson, like they had to give you shit for it. Did you? What happened? Tell us.
Can I be honest with you?
You sure can?
We didn't really get shit for it because here's the thing. For those that know anything about my family and where we from, you know, if you can't say it to my face, that means you value your health that much. So for me, it's almost like a thing as to you know, me and my older brother. You gotta remember, my older brother is the revered older brother. You know, in the streets, even though I held my own and did what I had to do, no matter what, I still had the revered brother. So nobody who was my brother's age could ever say anything to me without something happening. And when you got cousins who are on the same wavelength as your brother, I didn't have those kind of problems growing up. You know, of course, I would get the look every now and then, like, how was you listening to it? That would be it. Nobody never say, you like that New Kid. I never got that. I promise you, I never ever got teased because, again, me and my brothers used to walk through the hall singing step one. You can have lots of fun. Like and this is in the West Coast. We didn't care. Vanilla Ice too. I'm a diehard, unapologetic Vanilla Ice fan. So for me, it was almost like I dare you to say something to me. Yeah. What you want to say to me? Yeah. I like this. I have a saying. There's no such thing as a guilty pleasure. I like what I like. So my thing is that you couldn't tell me nothing back then. So for me, it was never really a struggle. If anything, it made my friends more curious. And you got to remember, because, like, for example, I'm an MC Hammer fan. So, of course, most of my MC friends that I spit rhymes with, a couple of them would be like Hammer. I said, did y'all forget our dance? Number one. Number two, Kool G Rap and Big Daddy Kane and Rakim are my first 3 favorite MCs. So the fact that y'all even questioning my love for hip hop and my history of what I know about rap, all because I like a rapper that happens to dance. I never said Hammer was the best rapper. I don't like Hammer for his rhymes. I like Hammer for the overall presentation of what he does. He is without a doubt the James Brown of hip hop in terms of the production, you know, 50 million, what Too Short said, 80 million dancers in a big old band. Yeah, that was James Brown. So he brought that aesthetic into hip hop, and I dug it. Like I dug You Can't. I was like anybody else. If you stood still when You Can't Touch This was on, I didn't trust you. I'm from the street. I'm hardcore to the bone gristle. I'm raw. But when something good comes on, you best believe I'm doing the Running Man every 5 minutes. That's me. And I had no shame. And I'm gonna be honest with you. I think that's probably why the girls, and I'm gonna say this respectfully with no arrogance, I think that's why a lot of the girls did like it, because they knew how street me and my brother and my cousins were, but we love other stuff too. Like my little brother, Peppy, who's my first hype man, you know, we turned each other on to different stuff. I turned my little brother on to heavy metal and rock and roll, and he turned me on to dance hall reggae. I love Bob Marley, but he turned me on to Shabba Ranks and Super Cat. Later on, Sean Paul. Like that's how we are in our family. Like we got into different stuff. He wasn't stuck in our ways. You know what I mean? And that's a really good thing, because like I love rock and heavy metal too. And a lot of the heavy metal guys that I know, they love their music raw and pure. They don't like to mix it. So when I talk about loving New Kids or I love my hip hop, they're like, what? I'm like, stop, because if you're not well-rounded in your music, you don't know music. So tell me some of the like heavy metal artists that you actually enjoyed. Oh shit, don't get me like, started. We could talk some let's well, first and foremost, when we get into that, if we're going to talk about heavy metal, let's go back to the forefathers real quick. Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, Funkadelic, the first all-black heavy metal band. In a lot of ways, they came before those groups. George Clinton, my mentor, of course. Definitely Fishbone, Bad Brains, Motorhead, Lemmy rules
let
forever.
me let me rest in peace.
Motley Crue, Poison, all the hair. I love all the hair metal bands, probably except for Winger. Winger was okay, but Def Leppard
We
I
like
love. Well, Twisted Sister, Megadeth, Pantera. I love them all, even all the punk rock groups like Sex Pistols, AC/DC, Van Halen, and I'm definitely, without question, unapologetic. The first band that got me into rock and roll overall, without question, is Kiss. So I'm a diehard Kiss fan forever.
Wow.
So for me, it really, you know, it's not too many people I didn't like in heavy metal or pop. Like I said, Winger, I kind of like, okay, they're okay, but most of the other bands that you can think of, like from Metallica to Megadeth, I was heavily into at that particular point.
And that is awesome because it's such a stereotype that they think that metal's for white people, hip hop is for black.
Well, no.
Not
Can I correct you real quick?
Yeah.
Can I correct you?
You sure can. I know what you're about to say, but say it.
First of all, it's pure ignorance.
Yes,
because if anybody knows the history of American music, and I'm gonna say this, and I don't really care who likes it or not, but the truth is the truth. And you already heard what Donnie Wahlberg said on stage the other night when Velvet Devoe came out. So I'll leave that there. American music is all derivative from the Black African American experience. So do understand that without the blues, there will be no rock and roll.
Exactly.
Period. Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, Howlin' Wolf, those are the forefathers. B.B. King, Albert Collins, my idol. These are the forefathers of what we call, even Ike Turner, rock and roll. We are the creators, period. T-Bone Walker was playing behind his back way before Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix breaking his guitar. White people began doing that after the fact. That is the truth. And I'm not saying that because of the contributions that some white rock and roll artists did make. And I'm gonna tell you something. If Elvis was here, he would tell you too. Elvis wasn't a racist. The people behind him were. Elvis knew the truth and he spoke. Elvis always gave acknowledgement to where he from. He didn't call himself the king of rock and roll. The media did.
Right.
I always have to remind people that he didn't call himself the king. He said, I'm not the king of rock and roll at all. He knew where that belonged. Chuck Berry and Little Richard. Because if there was no Chuck Berry and Little Richard, there'll be no Beatles or Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is that all of that is in cycles. We are the creators. So it used to behoove me and piss me off when people would try to say Lenny Kravitz was, oh, that's that white boy shit. No, it's in what world? What book are you reading? So my thing is that I'm so glad that you brought that up. Now, it wasn't meant to correct you. It's just always meant for those who are going to be watching this. Right. Need to understand. Do your research. Understand and know. Don't be alarmed when you see a young Black kid that may gravitate towards that. Living Color is from my hood. You understand what I'm saying? They're from my hood. Vernon Reed is from St. Mark's Avenue. Ain't that something? Yeah. Vernon Reed is from St. Mark's Avenue. Corey Glover is from Utica. That's Eastern Parkway. That's, oh, come on. That's Brooklyn. These are hood, just as Black as me, if not dark. Yeah. And they conquered the rock and roll game upon their arrival. Even though Fishbone and those guys came before them, they didn't achieve the same success as Living Color and Lenny Kravitz. And then look at Prince. Prince broke down the barriers. Right. Period. Yes. On all levels. Not gender-wise, even though he wasn't gay, but he still played with the image so much that he wanted to fool people into thinking like, well, you know, my music's for everybody, which it was. Because that was the whole point. No, don't. He told his record label, don't label me, don't market me as an R&B artist. He told Warner Brothers that. See what I mean? Like, he knew. At 17, he knew what his mission was about. And speaking of which, Rick James, another one. You know, they classify him in funk and R&B, but Rick James was very much rock and roll. His roots are in rock and roll. Him and Neil Young were in a band together called the Minor Birds back in the day before Neil Young became Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. See, a lot of people don't know about Neil Young. No. Neil Young is more R&B than rock and roll.
That's awesome. But I
People don't
love
even
the
know.
history. I love the history
Yeah,
because people should know the truth. They should. Because
absolutely.
history is almost like being erased.
Because you know why?
What's
Because
going on.
what happens is that, see, you gotta remember, we didn't have the internet back then. So that's why I understand if some people don't know it, they never did the research. So you gotta remember. So ask yourself, how is it a guy like me is able to know all this stuff pre-internet? You know why? Because first of all, I was fortunate enough that I hung around the right musicians. I hung around my mother's friends. I got schooled in a lot of ways, but then also you gotta remember, I wasn't around my family or my mother's friends all the time. So of course, one has to read books. One has to actually read and do research and look at interviews and have an understanding of why did David Bowie write Space Oddity? Or why did Led Zeppelin write Stairway to Heaven? What made the Eagles put that whole part of a guitar solo in Hotel California? These are things I had to study on my own.
Right.
You know, so
I feel you, man. Preach, brother. I love that. I really appreciate your music knowledge. Okay.
thank you,
I
appreciate
love
that.
it. Yeah, definitely. And so now tell us about the first time that you had an actual break. Like when you were going to get,
Mm.
yeah, like auditions. Tell us auditions. What was your first audition like?
Wow. Well, here's the interesting part, and this is, my career is very, I would say it's strange, but in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
I went to auditions. Oftentimes I didn't get it, and they never told me anything wrong. Like I never heard of you're not black enough or you're not this. I never got any. Because I hear a lot of those horror stories, and ooh, Jesus. So I was fortunate enough that I was able to cultivate where I am now because of my consistency being on the front lines, working for my family. So my aunt Lois has a band called Eternity. They played in the city. Then I had my grandfather on the West Coast with his band, and I had my uncle with his band. Then every now and then I had my mother. My mother was still school teaching, but she was still doing shows late at night. So every now and then to be like, let your son come up and sing. So my mother would let me come up and sing a couple of things. And what it did was it led me into what we call the circle of the industry. So again, like I told you earlier, I was already in clubs at 15, 16, 17 years old. So of course, I'm at all the Cafe Waz in New York, Groove, when it started. This Groove came a little bit later, but Cafe Y, La Barbat, Lola's, Cheetahs,
I remember.
light before it became Le Poisson Rouge. You know what I mean? Like all different things that became what it was. I was part of the scene, so eventually, word gets around pretty fast. So if I had to think about what my first break was, it really came through word of mouth, and that would possibly be, I'm going to say, probably working with George Clinton.
Oh,
That was my first real break. Yeah, I mean, not
that's an
counting all the stuff that I did before that, because basically that was my aim. I told my mother at 12 years old I was going to join Prom and Funkadelic because I figured if there's anybody that could understand the musical chaos that was going on in my mind at 12 years old, it would be George.
Yeah.
Because George influenced all the guys on my list. Everybody, he's another one. Name somebody that P-Funk didn't influence. Even all the boy bands. Even Donnie Wahlberg said on the way to school, he would hear Parliament Funkadelic and Led Zeppelin being played. And by the time he got to his school, it was all the hip hop, Run DMC, Fat Boys, like me, same thing. Run DMC, Fat Boys, Houdini, So we really had this. That's why me and Donnie have a lot in common because we had the same kind of upbringing.
Right. And so yeah, no, that's amazing because I mean, he's an icon as well, George Clinton, and I love like his crazy. I love it. But so how did you get that break? Like, what was it like to work with George Clinton?
Say it again.
What was it like to work with George Clinton?
Working with George Clinton, I think for me, I can't even explain this sometimes because most times in a retrospect to everything else, it really became a thing where my dream was coming true. Like I really had the understanding of everything else to make things appointed to for those that didn't really understand what the thing was in retrospect to really having a thing of preference with all that kind of stuff. So it was interesting for me. It was very interesting for me on a lot of different levels. in terms of making it what it's supposed to be with working with George. I mean, P-Funk, I mean, come on. How could you not be inspired by that?
Mm-hmm.
How could you not be inspired by that? I mean, it's like P-Funk changed the game on so many different levels till it's not even funny. I mean, sonics, the mixing of operatic vocals. You got a real type of thing going down, getting down. There's a whole lot. We want the fun. George is the mad scientist of modern pop music, because even though it was laid on a hotbed of funk, it was so many ingredients that George was putting in there.
Mm-hmm.
Opera, classical, jazz, country even. I'm a little old country boy, just young and in my jeans. I don't gamble, drink, or swear. And she did this to me. I'm like, George was just everything that you wanted to be. Now you understand why Prince was heavily influenced by P-Funk, because Prince kind of cracked, like I said Prince earlier, Prince cracked the code. Like he studied all these guys as well and understood, okay, let me take a little bit of that, let me take a little bit of this. But that's what George was doing. George was taking a little bit of the Beatles, a little bit of Bach, a little bit of Led Zeppelin and Vanilla Fudge, all the 60s psychedelic rock. George was taking all of that. He took a little bit of James Brown. He definitely was a Sly fan, Sly and the Family Stone. So for me, like I told you, being able to work with him was the ultimate dream. And I always said, God forbid, if I had never did nothing else in life, that was the ultimate goal for me. I could say, damn it, I worked with George Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can't say that. So for me, even to this day, I mean, 20 something years later, being a P-Funk Cam member, I still pinch myself. It's still surreal to me that, that I get the love and respect, and it looks pretty damn good on your resume. I have to say, it's pretty interesting when you can kind of tell people, I work with so-and-so, I work with so-and-so. Well, I work with George Clinton. It says something.
Period.
I mean, for people that know music and understand what his influence was, it means something. I always tell people that might not mean shit to you, but if you understand music the way I do and understand how this man changed the game of not only R&B and funk music, but pop music in general, then, I give up.
Yeah, for real. No, I hear you. So then now you're a little older, you worked with your idol, and then I've known you for the reason that you work with Donnie, because I'm such a Black Kid and such a New Kids fan.
Yes.
And so that's like on a whole other level. That's on the other side. So tell us a little bit about how you even got to meet the guys, work with the guys. Like, tell us about that.
Well, as everybody pretty much knows, I don't even like saying I'm a self-professed blockhead, because I think for me, when you have to really go above and beyond to prove that, I think a lot of the blockheads gravitated towards me, and I understood it as time went along, because I realized that for a lot of the other, especially for the females, a lot of them were like, wow, we got another, and I understood why, because let's keep it honest, New Edition, Menudo, Boyz II Men, later on, Jodeci, even though the guys understood it and some of them respected it, it's a girl's thing. R&B groups, male groups, are for even though the music is for everybody, but let's keep it honest. The look, the fashion, who are we singing to? We're singing to the girls. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the guys that were hating when their girlfriend would scream over their favorite member didn't like that. So while all those guys were hating, me and my cousins and my brothers, we were studying, we were paying attention. So of course, without question, I saw New Kids' first show at the Apollo. I was only about 11 or 12. I became an instant fan. So that's a whole nother story for another day, but I've been that way with them forever. So fast forward 25, 30 something years later, they get back they reunite. I never lost faith. I knew that one day they would. And like all of us blockheads, I think it was, I went crazy. I was like, wow, they finally did it. Like, I'm excited. So my mission became clear. I said, I got to meet my heroes, especially Donnie, because Donnie is my number 2 favorite in terms of that. Like him, and I studied Jordy more for singing. I studied Donnie for just overall swag and the way he presented his vocals. Because he always says to himself, he said, even as a singer, we left that strong point to, the guys that were in our group that did it even better than I do. But I always thought that Donnie had such a presence in his vocals that were extraordinary on a lot of different levels in his own right. So I had to meet him. You know, it was more so of a thing. So thanks to Jimmy Marsh, you know, one of the Boston affiliates, great MC, great friend. That's how I finally met Donnie when they did the I believe it was the No Casino tour, if I'm not mistaken. It's the tour after the first one that they did. And either the full service tour right before that. I went to all three tours, but the thing is that I met him through Jimmy. So Jimmy made sure that I met Donnie, and that was it. We became close ever since. You know, we have been started following each other, and he would peek in every now and then because he loved when I would drop a lot of historic facts about new kids that a lot of the other fans didn't even know about. You know what I mean? Because anything that I had to say, he would always be like, tell him again, Law. He like, because he's like, so that made me feel good. I'm like, I know what I'm talking about. And Donnie wasn't going to deny it. So it really made me feel good that my childhood idol was respecting what I said, but even better than that, you know, everybody knows how Donnie operates. You know, Donnie was really checking out my movement. He was listening to my music. He heard me sing. He's like, wow, the Law gets big. He saw me dance, he saw me rap. And of course, we kept building our relationship over the years. You know, and for me, honestly, it wasn't even about us working together musically, because God forbid if that never happened, we would still be as close as we are now. You understand what I'm saying? Because Donnie just is just an overall incredible human being outside of music. Music is a part of what he does, but I believe that being a good human, I don't care how talented you are, I don't care how many plaques you got on your wall, how many Grammys you got, that don't mean shit. Being a good person is the most important thing. And Donnie Mother and Wahlberg is one of the most incredible human beings that there is. So when he announced to the world that we were finally going to work together, that's all I needed to hear. I was just like, bro, I'm waiting on you, man. And that was just it. You know, like, no, he announced it. For everybody that saw when we went live on his page, I was expecting it. He was just giving me my flowers. And he just like, well, you know, you always giving me mine, so I'm giving you yours. I'm like, wow. And, you know, he respects my history. He loves my history. He loves what I'm about. Same thing with him. So that's really how we came to be close, pretty much.
And so from this little boy that was in Brooklyn, you know, just being a Brooklynite and just doing his own thing, and then working with some of your biggest idols, that is an amazing journey that you've had so far. So kind of tell us what's next for you.
Pretty much everything. I mean, in addition to working with Mr. Donnie Wahlberg, I have a lot of different projects coming out. I have 3 albums actually coming out before this year is over. I took the pandemic and used it wisely. Everybody knows I have the Plan Talk podcast. We've had Vanessa Williams, Lisa, Big Daddy Kane. Oh my God, the list goes on and on. We had the late, great Prince Marky D from the Fat Boys. And actually we had him 2 months on before he passed away. And this is what my podcast is about, making sure that my idols get their flowers from me directly, so I can let them know how much they mean to me. As you saw when we lost them, you just don't know. You know what I mean? So, of course, we have my Plan Talk clothing line, which is doing real good. My Plan Talk merch, which I was supposed to start years ago, but the timing wasn't right. My fans have been waiting, so we've been doing very successful with that. And my country pop artist, Arizona Lindsay. My Latin artist, Tina Torres, we're working on her project now. We have a video getting ready to come out, which features me, called Celebrate. So it's really, it's a lot of stuff going on. We're always working here at Planet 12. So I promise you, keep staying tuned, because there's always something on the horizon. And, you know, everything started to open up during the pandemic, even with all the craziness going on with different things now that I don't even want to get into, but just more so, know that no matter what the situation is, I'm going to always be working no matter what. So
I feel you on that. You got to stay busy.
Absolutely.
So could you like rhyme a little bit for us? Could you give us a little sneak peek or something? All right.
Let me freestyle a little bit. L.A.W. competition, I slaughter. Drink it down, flourish, let it do it like water. Listen to my style, I think you order. Not Mexicans, but they headed for the border. I told you a long time ago, my rhymes are dope. When I rack the microphone, other wax seeds has no hope. I break it on down section after sections. My name is Low like that kid from Tekken because I break down MCs in sections in less than 60 seconds. Play video games, L.A.W is my name. I tear down lanes like pictures, I crack them out the frame, hang them up on my wall. That's law spelled backwards. L.A.W is the movie, but I'm not an actor. Manufacturer, run over whack rappers like a tractor. When I grab the microphone, watch how quick I smack you with a handful of 5 fingers of death. Lyrical assault weapon till there ain't nothing left. Leave whack MCs out of breath. Hold it. When I grab the microphone, watch how I own it. Smash MC's iPad or rhythm particular. Grab the microphone and kill MC's particular. Maybe yet hit the stage when I rage. Come off like a 12 gauge, roll up like a hand grenade. War, I'm ready for it. I gotta score it. Just like juice or Kool-Aid, watch me pour it. That was a freestyle. I just
nice. No, I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Totally enjoyed this. We got to do this again. Definitely.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now for all of my dreamers and believers out there, don't forget to stay safe, stay humble, and as always, do it with me. Stay fabulous.
Stay flabby. I love it. Yes.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Fabulous. Yes.
Thank you, guys. We love you.
Thank you.